John Pooley is Assistant Chief Ambulance Officer and Head of Emergency Preparedness for the London Ambulance Service. He took up his current post last year as I said, Assistant Chief Ambulance Officer and Head of Emergency Preparedness. And I think I will leave it at that, John, and you can tell us a little more if you wish.
Okay, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Fine, thanks very much. And I'm very pleased to be here to talk to you today. Mine's not the scientific side of it. This is to give you a feeling and, from our point of view, a first responder's view about responding to incidents and what, basically, what ambulance services do. Because I have to say we're probably our own worst enemy in that probably the public don't really understand what ambulance services do. First thing people do when you knock on their door is say, oh, which hospital are you from then? Well, we don't come from hospitals. We're set up like the fire brigade and the police, and we're our own entity. But we are an integral part of the NHS. But I also want to talk about what we do and what challenges we face in a modern world, because that's the view that most people have of an ambulance or the ambulance service. It's the ambulance that goes along the street. They pick up people and they take them to hospital. There's an awful lot more goes behind that. And for you, the challenges are, what can you provide to us to be able to make our job more simple or make it more easy? Ambulances have changed over the last 40, 50 years. My father was an ambulance man before me. 40 years, in 1938 he joined the ambulance service and he was told, there's your ambulance, go out. And he was dealing with his first road accident within 10 minutes of joining the job and was told to get a first aid certificate within the first 9 months. So hopefully we've moved slightly on from there in that he could go for nine months not having a clue what he did. Nowadays it's changed massively. And ambulance services have had to diversify about the community they serve. And some of the community they serve, we can't get around the streets quite as quickly as we used to in London. Did anybody suffer with Blackwall Tunnel last night? Blackwall Tunnel was closed last night. It took me 2.5 hours to get 9 miles. So there are big challenges to us. So it isn't just about major incidents, it's about the community we service and how we service that. So we've had to diversify. So it isn't just about ambulances now, it's about cars to get there quickly, to try and save life. Yes, ambulance is no longer just about transporting people, it's about treating people. It's about starting to treat people at the incident and not when you get them to hospital. It's about treating them as soon as you can. And to do that, we do it in various ways. And now we have push bikes. And even when we get to Notting Hill Carnival, we have people on foot. So there's an awful lot of challenges for us and how we communicate and how we communicate across those. But when it's warning and informing, one of the responsibilities we talked about earlier, and I'll change it to a slightly better view, go back to February, what happened and London's transport ground to a halt. So there's a warning and informing people about what's going on, stay in, those sorts of things. Don't use the transport links. Well, don't use it. It was not there. It wasn't there to use. The biggest problem is in our plans. We all put these wonderful plans in. We have a control room which sits just the other side of Waterloo Bridge and all our staff work there. Where is our control room? It's in the middle of central London because historically we planned that it has to be there. Okay, it's within the congestion charge zone, so none of our staff want to pay congestion charge, so what do? They come to work on public transport. So what happened on the day that London ground to a halt with its transport network is we had lots and lots of ambulances around the capital. We had nobody to take the 999 calls, so we had to put in contingency plans to get extra people in because suddenly there wasn't a transport network. So we had to go and pick them up and bring them to work. Night crew had to stay on and whatever. So there are some big challenges. And again, it's not just about terrorism. It's about weather and it's about climate change. It's about all those things that affect us. How do you get to people? Where is the access to people? I mean, we had this gritting, that was set up by Cobra. There was the gritting czar who was going to decide who had what and whatever. Wonderful. So what did they do? They kept the bus routes open. Why? Because of the transport networks. That's fine. But, you know, how do you get your vehicles out? How do you actually get to people? It's not just about being able to get around the roads, but it's how do you get to people? Yes, We've got some 4x4s in London, not very many, and that's again about thinking about the future and about how you're going to diversify and how things do change. So we never thought that we would ever need 4x4 vehicles in London. We've had to start thinking about trying to change things and trying to think about what could happen to us. And of course, again, I said in this time it was difficult for us to get staff in. So to be fair, we roped anybody in to help us at that stage. So there were various people that we used along the way. But it is great difficulty trying to get to people. That is actually a picture taken in Deptford. So it's not in the country, nowhere else. It's not anywhere, you know, right out in the middle of nowhere. That is at the back of Deptford Ambulance Station. And this is a road in Bromley. Very difficult, can't get to the sides. The roads have not been gritted, so all the bus routes were gritted, but none of the side roads were gritted. Very, very difficult times for us. And indeed, there's a picture from the other side. So, warning and informing, media messages. What are the sorts of things we want to tell people? What are the things we need to tell people? And how do we do it? We as an ambulance service, as a Category 1 responder, still have a responsibility to warn and inform. And again, some of that might be our own staff, i.e. how are you going to get to work today? Or how do you want to get to, what do we want you to do? Major incident happens. This is Aldgate Station on the 7th of July. Difficult, very difficult time for us. It's the first time London had ever faced multi-site major incidents. Most major incidents and major catastrophes within, depending on length of time, it's usually 8 o'clock train crash, home for tea and medals by 4 o'clock. That's the usual pattern. But this wasn't. This was, again, this was across, we didn't know what was happening. It was right across London. It basically gridlocked London. So London became very difficult to manage. And again, about when you're thinking about what you put in place from an emergency point of view to manage something like that, that actually isn't the challenge. The challenge is running the ambulance service normally around the capital while this is going on. People are still falling over, people are still having their heart attacks. How do you manage that? Because actually, once that goes, there's the best piece out there. It's called Sky News. We all use it. You go into any police control, any ambulance control, and any fire control, and I'll guarantee they'll have Sky News on, because they'll have a helicopter there just as quick as anybody else. And they will get the pictures to us very, very quickly. So there is, and then of course our staff see that. And what happens? This is what everybody joined the job to do. They all rush in and say, can I come and help? No, thank you, actually, we need you for tomorrow. Put yourself in their place and ask yourself, how would you feel if suddenly this challenge faces you that you've joined the job for, to suddenly be told you're not really wanted? We want you to, pick up somebody with a broken ankle on the corner of a street the next day. It's something you need to get your head around. Just to give you an idea, this is a command structure we had to put in for the 7th of July. The reason I put it up there is I'm not going to go into detail about who was who and what was what, but it's just the enormity of the situation. And I'll come on to rising tide incidents in a minute. When you get an incident which goes on over a longer period of time, pandemic flu, floods, those sorts of things, can organisations maintain that sort of cover over a prolonged period of time is the question. Yes, you put it in for a day, but past that, you have to think about how you manage those situations to try and get some resilience, which is what David was talking about earlier. How do you manage to become resilient? So one of the big things that we've learned from commanding an incident or commanding a big event is you take it out of your normal control structure. You take it out of your normal communication structure and you put it on separate channels, and basically what you do is you only tell the people you want to know the information. You do not, I'm not talking just about public here, I'm talking about within our organisation, you do not generally just broadcast it to everybody, because actually everybody starts to listen in and everybody tends to sort of go via the incident just to have a look, and in the end half your ambulances have gone where you don't want them to go. It's amazing. We had an incident many years ago now. This was a fire at Watney's Brewery in Isleworth, and I wonder why they all wanted to go to Watney's Brewery, but if you know where Isleworth is, we did wonder why one of our vehicles from Romford ended up there, but it was one of those things. I hasten to say it's over 30 years ago, so the people concerned are no longer with us. But there is a thing about actually, there's times when you actually don't want to send information out because you actually want to keep your organisation efficient. But we are the envy of the world when it comes to this, and this is called LESLEP, or the London Emergency Services Liaison Panel. I sit on LESLEP for the ambulance service, and basically what it is a group of people around, so you can see from the bottom, Metropolitan Police, Fire Brigade, City of London Police, us, local authorities, Maritime Coast Guard Agency, you name it. Utilities now are on it, BT are on it, and we decide who's going to do what during a major incident, and we actually decide whose job is what. So you're not suddenly, just when you get to the incident, you don't know what the other person is doing and what their responsibilities are. That manual is downloadable at that website address, and basically what it does is it says there's a section on police, a section on ambulance, there's a section on fire service, and so on and so on and so on. And it tells you exactly what their responsibilities are at an incident. I never read the ambulance bit because I know that. It's the police and the fire service bit I need to know. What are people going to do when I get there? And that's really important about working across organisations rather than in the silos that we often do. And that is the envy of the world. I've spoken in New York and they just look bleary-eyed at you. There are 75,000 fire departments in the US. They all have a chief, and they all have their own procedures and policies. I'm not saying the policies aren't any good, I'm just saying it's a hell of a challenge. Okay, so diversifying again, we're moving on rapidly. Some of the challenges of modern day life, ambulance services no longer just provide that immediate medical treatment. So you'll see there various vehicles. This is one of our one of the best initiatives we've had and the greatest saver of lives. You see the bikes going around the terminals at Heathrow. Heathrow is the biggest place for cardiac arrest in this country. There are 92 defibrillators in Heathrow, and basically we've got about an 85% success rate in resuscitation in Heathrow. But there is quite a high rate of cardiac arrest because people are quite under stress flying and those sorts of things. So, the point is diversify and change depending on what. And this bottom left, that's a casualty clearing station that we would set up at a major incident. Okay, chemicals. We now, and I'll move swiftly into some of the incidents that we've had to deal with. So it's about the whole scene and about safety. So now we have to supply emergency support vehicles or incident support vehicles around the capital because there is a threat, obviously, of chemical, biological, radiological, those sorts of things. So we now, as an ambulance service, are responsible not for public decontamination, we are responsible for the decontamination of the injured. The fire service manage mass decon, and they manage people who have just simply been contaminated. But the fire service support us in this, and we provide personal protective suits, showers, you name it, tents. It's a massive undertaking. So there's a lot more we do these days than we ever did. And we've got something called HARTS, and this is Hazardous Area Response Team. If you see the bottom right-hand corner, the top two are the command vehicle that we have now with satellite communication, with all the trimmings of the new technology. And I'll talk about that in a second about the new technology. It has its place, but it has to be robust. And the bottom right hand is the fire at the Royal Marsden Hospital. And that's the first time in UK that ambulance staff actually went into a building wearing breathing apparatus. That has always been, the fire service have done that in the past. We now believe that we should not wait for people to be brought out to us. We believe we should be there treating them at the actual site of the injury. So I won't talk about that. Okay, this is some of the things they have. Additional protective equipment. We can now supply, with a piece of kit that they carry, the heart team carry, 50 patients with oxygen at once from a set of cylinders. So we can provide. So there are some of those things that we're looking at, some of those pieces of equipment that have been actually developed over the years. Specialist equipment for monitoring equipment, lots of things, bulk equipment for major incidents. And we're also diversifying into urban search and rescue. This started off in Yorkshire, obviously, because you would imagine people do urban search and rescue in Yorkshire and off of cliffs and caves and God knows what. But buildings do collapse in London. There was the Dean Ryle Street building that collapsed just around the corner from Scotland Yard. And it's about getting paramedics into people now rather than actually waiting for people to be brought out. More lives are saved this way than if you simply wait for them to be brought out. Just coming towards the end is some of the things that ambulance services now face, unfortunately. It's a fact of life that we have public order issues in our capital now. And again, Notting Hill Carnival isn't so bad now. It used to be many years ago, but it's where we cut our teeth at the beginning. Notting Hill Carnival actually is a danger from lots and lots of people, and it becomes overcrowded. And I think at some stage, how difficult that's going to be, I don't know. They're going to have to move it because it's too many people in too small an area. But it's usually pretty peaceful these days, and it's quite a good thing to do. But unfortunately, G20, those sorts of things, we are faced with people on the streets who, create disorder. And ambulance services have to be ready for that, because people do get injured. And they're not just injured by people with truncheons, they're injured by falling over in large crowds, all of those sorts of things. Innocent bystanders when people throw things. So, they do get injured. So it's us working very closely alongside with our partners in the Metropolitan Police. And these are, apart from the bottom left, these are all ambulance staff being trained in public order. So it's really, really important that we train our staff. So just remember that London isn't the only place that's had a multi-site incident. This is Tewkesbury, I think, during the floods. And that was not only a multi-site incident, it's a multi-site incident that went on for days and days and days and days. How do you get your messages out? How do you tell the public what's happening? Have you got the right message? Are you sending the right messages? I don't know. There's the classic example on the 7th of July. I haven't got a picture of it. I have got one, but not today. There's a classic example of not joined up in communication. On the 7th of July, there was a matrix symbol on, the matrix signs over the M25 or over most motorways these days. And whilst, Cobra and the government were saying, London's okay, we're managing, we're coping, don't worry, UK PLC is still alive and kicking, this matrix sign said, avoid London, area closed. Not probably the best message to send out at that stage. So, but it was well-meaning, but it wasn't actually the message that should have been sent out at the time. So, communications, just quickly finishing off. Loss of communications. We consider communications as actually as a bonus. We do run exercises where we say there's no comms at all. How do you manage? So we use our bikes in a different way. We use them as messengers and those sorts of things. I'll be careful how I say this because I don't decry any form of technology at all, and if it can be used, that's fine. But it has to be paramedic proof. They'll break anything. So it has to work, and it needs to be simple. It can't be too complicated. So if we are designing something, we need to think about, will it work in the situation it's designed to do? And I quote the story that I don't know if it's true, but I quote the story of the Americans who apparently spent £25 million developing a space pen, and the Russians used a pencil. So it's about trying to, it's about keeping your feet on the ground, but it's about saying, yes, there are technologies that we can use. Just to finish off, I'd like to just a couple more slides, which I think are important, but they are, I would stress, ladies and gentlemen, that we are just past the anniversary yesterday, and the inquests are still going on into 7/7, so please bear with me. They are very sensitive times for all of us at the moment. So I'd rather not be quoted, but okay. This is a guy called Richard Barnes. No relative, David?
No.
That's okay then. A guy called Richard Barnes from the Greater London Authority, who chaired the Greater London Authority's inquiry into the response of London to the 7/7 inquiry. And basically he said, and this is my message at the end of this presentation, is about it's great to write plans and it's great to have all these processes in place, but please remember you're dealing with people, not just an incident. So it is about, it says all the relevant statutory organisations had their plans in place. These plans are tested, practiced and refined. They're brilliant, they're well done. However, the thread that linked them all together is that they proved to be service specific, meeting the needs of the services and not looking outwards. So they became incident plans rather than people plans. So the GLA took some evidence, and these last two slides are actual, they're available on the GLA website. These are, and I'll read them to you because they are important. This is a lady who was at the Russell Square bomb. She said, we could not communicate with the driver because the communications had been cut, but we needed someone or something to be able to tell us, we know you're there, and these are the simple messages we need to get across. We were stuck there for about half an hour, not knowing if we were going to live or die, if somebody was going to come and get us or not. She goes on to say, I got up to the ticket hall and I was with a guy from the train. We had no direction, no one was there. There were people all over the place. People just sitting down, crying on their own. People trying to breathe, people trying to take water. Yet again, there were no underground staff, no emergency services at that stage, telling us where to go, to sit down, we'll come to you. We will look after you, it's going to be okay. They're the messages the public want. That is not a failing of the emergency services. This is at the very beginning of the incident. How do you communicate mass people at the very beginning of an incident? Because we've all got these plans and we've all got these processes in place, but how long does it take us to kick those processes into being? How long does it take to get that command structure I put up into place? How long's a piece of string? It depends what time of day it is. 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning, it would be a lot longer than it would be on a Friday afternoon. But that, when you are trying to look at something to communicate, you have to ask what people want, and that's what they want. They want simple messages that say, we know you're there, you're going to be okay. So one of the things that we have done is, this is the set of objectives for the London Ambulance Service Major Incident Plan, and we've changed the objectives since the 7th of July, and the first objective now says, to ensure that we treat those involved as individuals and in the enormity of the situation, ensure that we do not lose sight of the needs of individual patients and we don't treat it just as an incident. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In fact, the inquiry from 7/7 is publicly available on websites, and we've spent quite a lot of time actually reading through them. And we'll make some, but are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you. Anthony Alston from Cranfield University at the Defence Academy in Shrivenham. You mentioned talking about not passing, when there's an incident, not passing information about the incident to all the other ambulance drivers, so they don't sort of gravitate to where the incident is. There's a mantra in the military that sharing information is good, it makes you... Do you have any guidelines, principles on what to share, what not to share?
We tend not to actually, yeah, okay. There's no written rule that says you won't tell everybody, but basically what we do is we'll take it out of the normal control setup, put it onto its own incident channel, and only use the people. We will tell our staff what's going on, we'll tell them there's a major incident going on, we will put it up on a public website, and when we have a major incident, we put an internal intranet website up so our staff can see what's going on. Because they watch Sky News if they're sitting in their ambulance station anyway, and they'll see it, people will talk about in the streets. But yeah, okay, it was a generalisation. We will not try not to involve those people in the actual incident itself. We'll tell them generally what's going on, but the actual, we'll take it out of the control room and we'll take people out of the control room and then manage it separately in a separate control room. So that's the issue. But yeah, I've got no problem with sharing the information.
So you manage it totally separately?
Yes. Yeah. Because you end up with dedicated people, so we will take whatever it takes, 50, 60 ambulances out of the normal core fleet, and we will also use surrounding ambulance services, mutual aid, those sorts of things. So we'll bring in Surrey and Kent or whoever to bring those people in. In fact, there's a famous picture of 7-7 outside King's Cross, and there's a row of ambulances, about 15 ambulances going up the road. And if you look very closely, very much to some of our staff aren't too happy about it, but they all say Beds and Hearts on the side. So there's this bit about actually why are people from somewhere else doing the job I joined to. So there's a bit about if you tell everybody what's going on, there's that balance to be drawn with actually there's still a service to run across London. So yes, you're right. There is this thing about, yes, we need to tell everybody, but who do you need to tell the actual real nitty-gritty information? But there's no right or wrong answer, I don't think, to that one.
Hi, John. My name's Greg Fisher. I'm, amongst other things, I'm an associate, research associate here at the LSE's Complexity Group. The question I've got, you mentioned some aspects of adaptation and diversification and 4x4s and so forth. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the learning processes you have within your organisation. So as society changes, as technology changes, you adapt appropriately to achieve your aims.
Yeah, I think ambulance services are involved very closely, not only at a corporate level, so we're involved with the GLA, the Greater London Authority. We don't report to the Mayor, we actually part of the NHS. The Fire Brigade and the police report to the Mayor in London, but we report to the NHS. So, but we are still an integral part of those community forums. So we work very closely with the local, what we call LRFs, local resilience forums, across London and around us. We work quite closely on a local basis with local community groups. I've been involved in a GLA-sponsored group, funny enough, talking about what Maggie was talking about, is looking at how we deal with people with disabilities in major incidents. How do you know, it's very easy to say, one of the things we put in after the 7th of July is we have a dedicated manager now whose job is to do nothing but talk to patients. Not any treatment, no any management. They have a loud hailer, and as you said earlier, loud hailer. It's the simple things that work. You know, stay there, we're coming for you, you're going to be okay. But how do you deal with people who can't hear? How do you deal with the blind? How do you deal with people that are disabled? And there's some of the challenges we are facing. So how do we do it? We work very closely with local groups, and we work very closely with, we have a group, we have a public group that sits with our trust board and actually talks through, and they have representatives from disabilities, from various people across all communities. And so how do we do it? We have to look at the area we serve, how it's changed, and how we manage that. So from the very first piece is, actually, when I joined the ambulance service, 40 years ago, unfortunately, but when I joined the ambulance service, you know, we did nothing on a Friday and on a Saturday and Sunday. I used to polish my car. It was wonderful. We've gone from this. Does anybody remember early closing days? There's a couple of people that will nod. You know, we don't have those anymore. Does anybody remember when actually shops shut at night? Because they used to, but they don't anymore. And we've got a 24/7 society now. So of course we've had to. So not only is it the way we treat people, not only is it the resources we lay on, but it's the amount as well. Because actually our big amounts now are probably at night, you know, after 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night in central London is our big problem area. When most of, you know, we obviously deal with a lot of alcohol-related incidents. So you'll see, you've probably seen it on the television. We lay on what we call, I hate the term, but we call them booze buses. And I've got this real sort of thought in my head of ambulances with a set of optics in the back, but that's not actually what it's about. We have dedicated vehicles for dealing with people with alcohol problems now. So we look at, and we do work with a lot of community groups too. So ambulance services, gone from the first aid set up, will come out and get you. We are actually part of the community now, and we work very closely with people in the community. And we will sit on as many groups as we can possibly get on to try and get some influence across the community. It's a very diverse community that we serve. And at the end of the day, those last, not the last two, but the two patient comment slides are the most powerful piece you can ever have, because they're the people you're serving. We've gone from a service that actually says, this is what you need as an ambulance service, to an ambulance service that listens and says, what would you like? What do you want? And that's what we are desperately trying to do.
So are there, in fact, specific processes that you use to identify learning and share it? Or is it just, shall we say, something that happens organically?
No, there is... Okay, after every major incident and every serious incident, we have a formal debrief process that we will go through, and that is a proper formal debrief process. That process feeds into... We don't call them lessons learned anymore. We call them lessons identified, because actually, do you actually learn the lessons is another question. So they're lessons identified. And we identify those lessons and we try to put in processes to actually overcome those. Hence, the first line in the major incident plan now. That came directly out of that learning. What we then do with that learning is that's shared around the LAS, the London Ambulance Service. And there is a thing called the EPB, which is the Emergency Preparedness Board, which I sit on. Is the heads of emergency preparedness right across the UK ambulance services sit on the same group. And there is a central repository for lessons identified. And once a year, we have a conference where we actually shut the doors and learn from each other's mistakes or learn from each other's positive things that we've done. So we do try very hard to do that.
I think that's very, very important to actually have both the identification and the sharing of both the good and what didn't work so well.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to use the mic. Okay.
Lorraine Dodd, also
Hi.
from Cranfield University at the Defence Academy. We look an awful lot in the military at the moment in terms of agile command and adaptive command, and where the decision rights or the decision delegation is put.
Yeah.
So within your organisations as well, you have individuals making judgments, and this is maybe to both speakers here. So it's how is all that side of it, with the principle of subsidiarity, does that then start to address where judgments can be made by people, where the lines of authority, not just authority over assets, but authority over judgment, how that moves up and down, when it has to be pulled back into a central COBRA base, and when it then can be distributed right out to the people, the first responders. So who decides when you can evacuate or not? Thank
you very much. I would like to ask both of you actually to give a quick response.
Well,
John first.
Okay, from a first responder's point of view, it's reasonably, well, it's clear, and it has to be clear. That's the whole point about it. It has to be, you can't think, hold on a minute. General day-to-day ambulance services paramedics make their own decisions, don't refer to anybody. They are trained and they are qualified and they make those decisions. If they come to your house, treat you and say you don't need to go to hospital, they'll leave you at home. That's fine, okay. We as a service, providing they've done what they're supposed to have done, will back them up in that decision. So they're used to making those sorts of decisions. And they are autonomous in their own right. However, when it comes to a multi-site, multi-casualty situation, shoot me down in flames, please, if you wish, that's the time you need command and control. And that's the time you have to have very, very tight control on people that make those decisions. So we put in, like I'm sure you know, the gold, silver, bronze process. So bronze are the forward people that are actually making the decisions right at the coalface, backed up by the silver, which is the tactical person overall managing that incident, and the gold at the end standing back managing the service or the strategic part of that. And it is very clear about who's who in that situation. And that's when we get to what we call major incident declared. We will declare a major incident, and then the lines of authority move, bang, in one fell swoop. And that's the only way, in my opinion, to do it.
Can I just, before I ask David, just to pick up on that, because at the same time, where you have the strategic overview of your command structure, you also need the decisions being taken at individual level.
Yep.
And this is really where the point is. Because you need to take advantage of the expertise, of the skill of your people when they're dealing with a specific individual, with a specific incident. So how much leeway do they have to use their initiative in that case? Because they can't come back to your command structure for every single incident. It just can't.
Okay. Right, major incident gets declared, we put a command structure in. The command structure and that's when you fall into managing an incident rather than people. And command structures are about managing incidents. What we will not do, the command structure will not take away the individual's paramedic's right to treat a patient. All they will say is, I want you to treat that one before you treat that one. Or I want those people moved before those. It's about, and I want that person taken to so-and-so rather than, because I, as the overall commander, know that hospital's full and that one isn't. Those sorts of decision processes. So we'll take some of those decision processes out of their decision making and say, do this, do that. But individually, when they're in the back of an ambulance with a patient, they're still their own decisions to make, and we will never take that autonomy away from them.
David, do you want to say?
Yeah, I think as I try to set out, if decisions can be made locally, we will let people make decisions locally. We don't want to put a bureaucratic machine in if that's going to inhibit in any way the response to any incident that's happening. If there is a need if there's a need for some higher coordination, then we will get involved, but we will leave it as much as possible to the local responders. It's only when it starts to get to regional or even national type level would we start trying to direct any operational response. We would always try and leave that to the professionals, as they know their fields far better than we do.
I think that's very important because it is the most effective kind of response is taken at multiple levels at the same time.
Yeah, they are.
From the individual to the team, etc., etc. And it's also the term we use is distributed intelligence. You need to take advantage of your distributed intelligence and skill, etc., etc.
Yeah, and remember, one of the roles of a tactical commander is to keep the strategic commander off your back.
Hello, sorry, I still can't stop thinking about New Orleans.
Who are you?
Didier Clement.
About?
New Orleans.
New Orleans,
what happened in
yes.
New Orleans and something. So, which seems to be at that stage there was a total breakdown of at least for a period of time. So my question for you two guys is, what is your breaking point? At what point do you figure out that it's too much? What happened if you had 7-7 in the middle of the snow? Would that be enough, or would it be something else?
How long's a piece of string, I suppose, is the answer to that one. What's our breaking point? I'm not sure we've got one, because we would continue to provide what service we could. We may not provide it as well as we possibly could have, but we will still provide a service. There is no plan in place that says we've had enough, we're going to pack up and go home. But what we do have, and I can only speak for London, what we do have is we have very joined up thinking when it comes to resilience in London. And I'm not suggesting they didn't in New Orleans, because I wouldn't stand up here and say they didn't. I don't know, I don't have that. But America is a very, very vast country made up of hundreds and thousands of different departments and different responsibilities. London is fairly big, but it's easier to manage from that point of view. We are very clear about what we would do in a catastrophic incident. And of course, we've been to New Orleans and learnt from what they've done. We learnt from 9/11. 9/11 just about was about what the Civil Contingencies Act fell out of. It wasn't quite. It was there on statute just before, but or it was about to go into that process. We have been thinking about it for a long time. I go back to, I said my father joined the ambulance service in 1938. There was a civil defence in this country in those days. And the other thing is we've come from a Second World War where actually we're used to managing large amounts of people on a regular basis. I'm not sure we are now because, but that background has made us put those sorts of processes in place. So ambulance services, fire services, police services are fairly militaristic in the way that they work. And they've got hierarchies and structures and people responsible for different things. Can I tell you, have we got a breaking point? No. I suppose I would say we've never broken so far, and we've never got anywhere near to it. Could we deal with new Orleans? I hope so. I can't say yes, we would.
Okay. We've run out of time, and there are an awful lot of questions. I suggest that you take them up with John, because we're about to break for coffee. But we do need to keep to schedule because there are a lot of presentations. So if we can break for coffee and be back at 10 to, please, ladies and gentlemen. And it's just next door, coffee, croissant, pastries, etc. And we'll see you in about 15 minutes.